Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 88 of Material Issues. I'm Mark Hershberger of Pop Detective Records over here on the East Coast of the United States of America, and joining me from his comfy pad out in California, my good friend of the International Pop Overthrow Festival, Mr. David Bash. Good evening, David. How you feeling tonight, my friend?
I'm feeling a little bit COVID-y. No, I do have a bit of a cold and sore throat. But no fever, so I haven't even tested. But these days now, anytime somebody gets a sore throat, the alarm bells go off, and it's like, all right, got to be COVID.
Yeah.
But like I said, when I was in New York doing IPO, on that trip when I had a fever and a sore throat, no cough and everything, turned out not to be COVID. To paraphrase Groucho Marx, sometimes a sore throat is a sore throat.
Exactly. And it's amazing. It's amazing just how much apathy there is anymore to crowds and the masks and COVID and everything. In people's minds, it's almost back to, pre-COVID type thing.
But, as it should be. If you're vaxxed, certainly if you're vaxxed, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're not going to get, seriously ill. You might go through a flu-like phase, but that could have happened before.
Listen, my 94-year-old dad's in a facility, and he's surrounded by nobody, and he's gotten it twice.
Wow.
So,
was it difficult? Good evening, whoever's saying that. It still says Facebook user on a lot of the commenters. So unless we look directly at the Facebook page, we don't know who's talking to us sometimes.
Unless they join the channel, yeah.
Unless they join and register or whatever it is. But was it difficult getting your dad vaxxed at his age, or?
No, that facility takes care of everything.
Oh, that's right. Yes,
just amazing
medical professionals there. Yeah,
it's amazing that he could get it twice when he's basically stuck in a little 12-by-12 room. Hey, Lisa.
Hey, Lisa. Good to see you guys. I mean, good to see you, not guys.
Well, the one thing I did want to mention before we get into our guest tonight in the show is a little bit the sad news that Frank Hammersland passed away this last week. Of course, he was a guest here on Material Issues for episode number 17, member of Pogo Pops, Popium, and all his solo work. And for me personally, one of my top 5 artists that I absolutely adore still and always will. So, Godspeed, Frank, and God bless your family and friends. Yep.
Yeah, and that makes 2 Material Issues guests we lost.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. But with every passing day.
Yeah. Definitely. Blessings to Frank's family. It was a joy having him on, and certainly a joy listening to his music.
Yes, indeed. And we'll have that forever. So.
And that's one thing I'd like to say to people. I hope this doesn't come off as unfeeling, but we've lost a lot of our idols, our musical idols over the last few years, particularly this year. January has brought about a rash of deaths. The longer we live, the more that's going to happen, obviously. The older we get, the more our 70s, our 60s, 70s, 80s idols, and even some of our friends. But when it comes to the musicians, the one thing that I think we should all remember is, as sad as it is that they're gone, their music is still here, and it always will be. And that's the reason. That's the main reason that we love them. I would think. I mean, obviously, some people, they feel a certain bond with other musicians. They feel like, well, they might be, if we knew each other, we'd be good friends. So you do feel like you've lost a friend. But, above all, the music still, it's here, it endures. And I just say that, let's try to focus on that so that we're not really too devastated when we lose someone. I mean, of course we're sad, but don't let it ruin your life. Just listen to their music and tribute, and know that it'll always be with us.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. So
let's see. Oh, watch check. Watch check.
Does it match the
It
shirt?
does actually. I've got my Accutron 60th anniversary Space View watch.
Very
As you
nice.
can see, it's got the skeleton look. It's got turbines in there. It's got a new electrostatic movement, which the old ones didn't have. It actually came with a black band, but then this orange band was released a little bit later. And I said I have to get one of those. It just makes everything stand out so much.
Yeah, nice.
So yeah, this is one of my favorite watches for sure. Thank you, Accutron. And also, don't forget Mont Blanc, the art of writing. Nice. There are no other pens. There are no other pens. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice.
And congratulations to Scott Rowland for getting into the Hall of Fame.
Well, we'll talk about that on a different episode when we have time.
No, I wasn't going to get into it. And also, our guest next week, should she actually appear, that's her bailiwick. So we'll be talking about baseball ad nauseum next week.
I'm on the fence whether he really deserves to be in there, but we'll run that again.
Yeah, a lot of people are.
Mint Blanc,
Mint Blanc. That's even better.
I like Mint Blanc better, Lisa.
Mint Blanc sounds like a really nice tea flavor.
Yep. Like a nice appetizer or dessert. I'll have the Mint Blanc. What do we got?
Speaking of dessert, we have a very delightful guest this evening on Material Issues. Known probably mostly for being a member of one of the first out bands called the Mumps. Back in the Greenwich Village scene of the late 70s. John Borak, I know that's you. This band certainly, they certainly made a huge impression back in the late 70s, and they're remembered fondly with this compilation that came out in 2021 on Omnivore Records, the best label in the world, of course. Yeah. Rock and Roll This, Rock and Roll That, with Lance Loud as the lead singer, dear departed Lance Loud. His family, of course, was the subject of a groundbreaking documentary in, I think it was 1972 or 3, An American Family. And our guest was best friends with Lance Loud and knew his family well, and in fact was on a few episodes of An American Family. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Since the Mumps days, he's worked with a whole lot of people like Klaus, Nomi, Lydia Lunch, Elvez. He's put out several solo albums, which are great albums.
Yes,
God, I must be nervous. I need my mouth is going dry here.
Well, he's he's a special guest.
I know. I never get nervous like that, but here we go. Anyway. Without further ado, to quote Captain Bligh, our next guest is Mr. Kristian Hoffman.
There he is. Good evening, Kristian. How are you tonight?
Well, it's still afternoon here.
Good afternoon.
He does that all the time, Chris.
I do it all the time. I'm on the East Coast. It's already dark here.
So I just want to say before everything starts is that I heard everything you said before you came on the air.
It's all wrong, right?
No, it's just I have various opinions you shared that I can hold you hostage to if I don't like the question. I will report them. But the other thing is, like, it was such a cheery kind of funereal introduction where you just kept talking about people dying and losing people that I thought I would bring out my human skull. and I will tell you, I got this when we were playing regularly at CBGB's. It was on Canal Street. Yes. They used to have a big bin of skulls that you could just go buy a human skull there. And I bought it for about $12. And I said, where do you get these? And they said, oh, we get them from the Ganges. And so, can't you tell? Look, there's no teeth. And so they were making that judgment like, yeah, these are poor people from India. You can actually call them Indians because they're from India. Right. And so you could just get a cheap one of those. And then you go right up the street and there was a store that only made glass eyeballs.
Oh, my God.
I got these all in one afternoon when I was hanging out with those people like Lydia Lunch and Lance Loud.
I remember that place, Kristian. I was a student at NYU during your heyday, and stupid me never went to anybody's shows. I could have walked into CBGB's any night that I wanted, and I never went because back then, for me, it was like any extra money I had to go to records. It's like, why would I go to a show when I could spend money on the recorded music?
So how well did you know Binky?
Yeah, no, I did know Binky.
Now at Sounds, he always recommended the records to me.
No, Binky Phillips worked. I guess he managed Sounds after a while, and he was a really good. Well, he still is a really good guy, and like you, very, very opinionated on things.
I also got records in New York I was walking up the street from my house and somebody was selling records out of the back of their car and they were my records because someone had robbed my loft of all of my records that were valuable. And they had Bleecker Bob said, oh yeah, this guy came in and tried to sell me these records. And so I saw your name on some of them, but I bought them anyway. And then when I wanted to get them back, he said, well, you have to pay me as much as I paid for them.
Oh, my God.
And then the ones that he didn't want, I found in a bin in St. Mark's Place. And so I got to buy back many of my records that I could afford.
Well, at least
that's a New York story, isn't it?
Terrible. Yeah, Bleecker Bob, for those who are listening, was maybe the most famous record store in Greenwich Village. Yeah, but he wasn't necessarily well loved as a record store owner, but he had good stuff.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, I almost wore my Bleecker Bob shirt tonight. It was one of the two black ones, but
there was a line around the block for each Sex Pistols 45.
Yeah,
when they came out.
No doubt about it. So you weren't brought up in New York, of course. You were brought up in Southern California, correct?
Yes, I was born in sunny San Gabriel. We moved to White Plains, New York when I was in kindergarten and first grade. And then we moved back to Santa Barbara. And that's where I stayed until I was about 18. And I ran away to New York with Lance.
How did you meet Lance?
I met Lance in high school. It's like one of those 50s TV comedies. We were at except for that there was a slight affect to it because I met him in art class in high school. And I was raised with 6 siblings, and we decided that we didn't need to be friends with anyone because we moved so often and we were so snarky. But Lance was just as snarky as I was. And then I felt very comfortable with him because he and the art teacher, Jack Baker, who was a huge influence on us, and bless his soul, he was really wonderful. And he actually recommended me for a scholarship to Cal Arts and all this other stuff. But he and Lance were just looking at everybody else in the room and just saying mean things about all of them, all of the other students in the room. And I just felt like immediately I was at home. It just felt so comfortable to me. And the other thing is, like, Jack Baker, he would make me do drawings for him for like invitations to his parties. And then he'd give me a bad grade because I didn't finish my homework.
Taking up all your time doing his drawings and not your homework.
Yeah, I learned about life from him.
What was your musical upbringing? Where did the music side of things come in your life? Was that parents, siblings?
Yeah. My first of all, my parents were professional peace activists, which I didn't really understand at the time. I thought they were from well-to-do backgrounds. My father's father was incredibly famous. His name is Paul G. Hoffman. He sort of did the Marshall Plan for the recovery from World War II. Wow. Like, we came from very fancy stock, and on the other side, my grandfather founded the Meats and Creamery, and so they're two like crazy things. But they came out of that background, and they were searching for spiritual sustenance, and they found Quakerism, and they both converted to Quakerism, and they were wild radical peace activists. And my father's job was to write a constitution that would unite all the countries of the world, so there would be no more war. We saw how that worked out, but it was a very honorable thing, and so we were raised around that. So they were totally into folk music, all of the anti-war things that are at the time, and they were into the Weavers first, and then they graduated to the Kingston Trio, the Limelighters, Joan Baez, and they got heavily into Joan Baez. I heard Buffy St. Marie all the time. I was with my mother when she took me to the El Paseo to buy the first Buffy St. Marie album, and I like going to the record store with her because they had a candy bowl to keep the kids distracted. So that was the music we grew up on, but we were also encouraged to listen to all sorts of music. And of course, you know, they had Odetta and Josh White and all of these people. And we didn't actually, I hate to use words that you're not allowed to use anymore, but we were kind of musically colorblind. We thought that that was just normal to be exposed to all of these great Black or people of color or whatever you're allowed to say right now, folk artists. And so that was the music we grew up on. But then, of course, there was AM radio then. So, you know, immediately you were, you know, the Beatles exploded into our life at the perfect time. And I was just young enough that I fell in love with the Monkees. And so my older brothers and sisters made lots of fun of me about that. Like, it was so unhip to like the Monkees if you liked real music, but I was completely unapologetic about it. I thought, these songs are great. Even then you could tell they were really good songs. But all that kind of stuff went along. And then what happened was Prague. And so Lance was obsessed with the Velvet Underground. And he actually used to get phone calls from Andy Warhol when he was about 15 years old. Wow. Because he was trying to get in touch. He was so obsessed. He wanted to find out how you could get in touch with the Velvet Underground. So he found a way to get in touch with Andy Warhol, and he called him. There was times when I was at their house, and Pat would say, "Oh, Lance is talking to Andy," and I was going like, "Who's that?" And it was Andy Warhol. So he did it every once in a while. Now it seems very kind of you get arrested for that if you were Andy. But at that time it was just inspired. So we were obsessed with the Stooges, and obsessed with the Kinks. So I think actually when I first met Lance, our three favorite bands were the Velvet Underground, the Kinks, it was Village Green Preservation era Kinks, and Sparks first album. And so we were just obsessed with those three things all at the same time. And so we were ready for anything. And also the Village Green Preservation Society was supposedly the least selling album in Warner Brothers history, until Kathy Chamberlain, who I was friends with, put hers out. And then that was the least selling album.
I just find that hard to believe.
Yeah. Well, it was still a certain point.
Had a lot of obscure releases in the late 60s.
But they were just because it was a major label, it was regarded as this like critically highly regarded but abject sales failure. Yeah, and then over the years, as they became more legendary, everybody looked into their back catalog and it did okay. And our good friend Andrew Sandoval, you know, did the reissue of the Village Green.
Yeah, so. Beautiful job too. You used the word unapologetic earlier, and I think that describes you very well. From what I understand, I mean, you and Lance saw yourselves as outcasts, but instead of looking at the other kids as, well, you know, they're more popular, they're cooler than us, you looked at them with disdain and said, you know, they just don't get us, so fuck them, you know. And I only wish when I was in school I could have had that attitude, because like you, I didn't fit in, and also like you, although I wasn't gay, I was what you would call soft. So because of that, I got a lot of the adjectives that soft kids got, like pussy and queer many times. That's because no one had any imagination in my high school. So I certainly can identify with it, but have the attitude that, well, you know, if they don't understand us, then screw them, you know, because we're who we are. It's just a wonderful thing.
Yeah, well, I also, to me, when I hear people's stories of coming out as gay and stuff like that, I was so well taken care of. I never had that issue. The Pat Loud, of course, was completely welcoming and she even autographed the Lance Loud book to my beloved other son, because I was such a deep part of their family. She moved to New York. When we moved to New York, she made dinner for the Mumps every week. You know, it was just like we had another mom in New York. But my own mother, one time she came to me when I was about, I'd say 17, and she said, "I'm a little bit concerned about you and I want to talk to you about something." And I said, "Yeah, sure, go ahead," because we were blabbermouths. And she said, I have a sense you might be kind of different in your sexuality. And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "My only concern for you is that out there in the world you might get hurt. So if anyone ever hurts you, please come to me." And that's the only thing. That's as bad as it got for me with my family. There was it was complete support. And when I met Lance, I had a partner in crime, and so I never had any I think it was gay bashed in New York once, but I wasn't sure because I was beaten by people with nunchucks and left for dead. And they might have just gotten the nunchucks and thought, hey, this is fun. I don't know if I was gay or not. But other than that, I really didn't experience any real prejudice. And also like Timothy Bottoms went to our same high school, and he was kind of friendly to us. And Jack Nakano, who was the director of the theater in the high school, was kind of obviously gay. But Tim Bottoms once said to me, hey, fag, you want to give me a blowjob behind the bleachers? And that, in retrospect, that seems very kind of like mental gay bashing. But to us, we thought it was hilarious. It didn't bother us at all.
That's so great.
But the amount of support that gave you and the confidence to be you and to that's amazing. I mean,
and Lance, of course, because he was a very out there in all ways. We never thought, and he finally said this on Dick Cavett once. He said, I don't think of myself as gay. 1 finger in 10 is your sexuality. I think of me as the rest parts of it. And that's one of the things that happened to me over the course of my so-called career, is that I got called a great gay songwriter. And I kept thinking I'm not a gay songwriter. I'm a songwriter. It's
a great glasses wearing songwriter.
Yeah.
a great songwriter that likes tie-dye. Yeah.
What where did the music, a lot of your music is so well done with piano and keyboards. Did you take lessons early on? How did you get into writing in that well with that instrument?
We were encouraged to take piano lessons when we were little kids, and of course we didn't like it. So we were but my family were very art supportive. They sent us to painting classes, just all the kids would get together and paint a picture of a ukulele or something. But we were encouraged to just dabble, and we actually had a room that was specified as the art room, and they had linoleum on it, so it looked like splatters already. So if you spill paint on it, you wouldn't be able to tell, and all that kind of stuff. But the weird thing was that my brothers and sisters were very cruel about my piano playing. Every time I would go to the piano, they'd say, can you just stop that horrible noise? I had a very negative reaction towards everything I did. So they finally got headphones for our little organ that was over in the corner. Oh, little organ. I didn't mean that. But in any case, I learned to play Wider Shade of Pale on it by ear. And then I went into high school, and one of the people tried to help me read piano. And she was, I think she was a student teacher, and thought that she would help people creatively. And I figured out I could memorize the thing and pretend I was reading the music because I couldn't read the music. And so then she stopped with me. But so I didn't have any support as a musician as a child. And then when I finally decided that the way that it happened was Pat Loud had dedicated her garage to letting all the kids from high school get together and make a racket. And they had a drum kit in there. They let me play drums. They didn't like it when Lance played drums because he played them with knives. And so but JD Doherty was there all the time. And we would just get in there and make some ridiculous racket. And we were pretending we had a band. And I wrote my first song, and my very first song was called I'm God.
With no iron.
I can quote something for it. I was confused, but then the answer I did see the earth would have one ruler, and the ruler would be me. I'm God. And that's one of the first songs we learned in Pat's garage. And then finally we were just fucking around, and they were going to be on the Dick Cavett show. And one of the, I think it was the second time they were on during American Family or after American Family, probably right after it. And Pat said, I'm not coming back on your show unless you let my kids be on the show too. Mm. And so they forced us to learn Lance's song that he wrote with a genius guitar player no longer with us named David Collert, Muscle Boys. And so we learned that song, and we played that on the Dick Cavett show. And I was friends with Duncan Hanna at the time and Steve Paul, and it was a delayed broadcast. And we were at his mansion in Connecticut or something. I don't know what he was thinking about having us there when we were that young. But I just thought, here's a nice guy who's taking us someplace, and we're going to watch this on TV. And we watched it, and I just went into the bathroom and cried. And then I came out of the bathroom, and they both looked at me pityingly, and they said, oh my God, that was just awful. And so that was my experience being on the Dick Cavett show. But the good thing about the Dick Cavett show is Lance and I said, we're not going back to Santa Barbara. We're staying here. And we told the whole band that we were going to stay there. And Jade already stayed with us and everybody else left. So we were there without a band, just eking our way around, finding rooms to rent for $100 and realizing like, oh, you're supposed to get a job and pay the rent. And we went back to Santa Barbara a couple of times because we didn't pay the rent, but we stayed there and just sort of got together a band. And Duncan Hanna actually introduced me to Rob Dupre, and that's how we got him in the band. And so it just ended up, it was like palling around, but I had the drive to consistently write songs, and I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, it's just a thing. It's a gift. It's a part of your DNA. And we hear that so often. Yeah.
Was New York a real culture shock for kids from Santa Barbara, or did you suddenly see when you went to the Village, like, this is a place where we really fit in?
We felt at home right away. And also that it's hard to overstate. Like, we lived on 15th Street and 7th Avenue, so we weren't in the East Village when we first got there. And then at one point I was living at 22nd Street and 8th Avenue for a while. But I finally got the loft at 240 Grand that was right off of where CBGB's was. It was right around the corner and near Delancey Street. And that became the scene for lots and lots of, we always had the parties where there'd be, there's James Chance, there's Robin Crutchfield, there's Klaus Nomi, there's Ann Magnuson, there's all of those people would come there, and then the Ravillos would store their equipment there and all that kind of crazy stuff. But when we first got to New York, we did feel immediately at home, and we loved that you didn't have to have a car, you could walk everywhere. You could take a cab and you could get by on almost nothing at that point. And when we all moved to the East Village, an expensive apartment there was $150. Wow. And, that was $150 in 1970s money. So that was probably like $300 now or $500 now,
It still wasn't much.
But it was like you could get by working a couple of days a week. I worked at Cinemabilia Bookstore with Terry York, who managed television and made all that stuff happen.
Yeah, Terry York.
Yeah, so I was working with Richard Hell. So he was on one side of me behind the counter, and then Rob Dupre was on the other side of me behind the counter. And I still have a Haley Mills still from Whistle Down the Wind that I stole from there. But at least I took good care of it. And so it was just...
I'm going to tell.
Yeah. And then when the thing is, we would go to Mercer Arts. The New York Dolls played there basically 5 nights a week for a couple of years, and so we went to them every single night. So it was just everything. They were my Rolling Stones, even though I was at Altamont.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. When you were there, did you see what was going on, or were you too far away?
Oh yeah, no, we were like 5 people away from the stage.
Oh my God!
We turned around when the people drove the Hells Angels drove their motorcycles into the crowd. We fell down. I was underneath somebody. The other people helped me get back up. Then we turned around and I saw them bashing a kid's face in with a pool cue, and he was taking pictures and his blood got all over the camera, and he was sitting there, he was weeping, and he opened up the camera and the film was all ruined. Yeah, it was really
powerful,
horrifying. And also, we thought the Jefferson Airplane were terrible, but you really had to wait through that. And Marty Ballin was like on some kind of hetero freak out where he was yelling at the audience because they weren't paying attention to him right or something. But we finally got to the Rolling Stones, and the weird thing is, the scarier it got, the better they got. It was like maybe, the New York Dolls are my real Rolling Stones, but that was one of the best concert experiences of my life, except for that you were surrounded by death and injuries.
Exactly.
That little thing.
Except for the blood and the carnage. Yeah. Everything else was fantastic. Oh, it's great.
There was that photo on Facebook a few months ago, at a crowd at some show at the Whiskey, and there was you and Lance and a bunch of other LA people. Who were you seeing back then? Who was really cool in that LA scene early on?
When I had my really long hair and I was standing next to Michelle Loud and we were just looking up like this. But the thing about it is, because we were really good friends with the GTOs, I don't know how that happened. There was John Ladner and Mark Lipscomb were kind of a couple who lived with them in a little teeny cottage behind the Vons that was off of Santa Monica Boulevard. And so you could practically walk to the whiskey from there. And so they could get in free anywhere you could go. And so we would just go stay with them and we'd hang out at their house. Sometimes I'd spend the night there. They were really nice. And they would we'd walk up and get into everybody. But, of course, we got to see the Velvet Underground at the whiskey. And Lance kind of inveigled his way into going back to their hotel room with them. And then he was like I was with David Johansen. Like, David Johansen was really nice to me because I was there every day. I would just look at him and go like this. Because I couldn't believe he was talking to me. He invited me to his house, and I went to his house once, and I went, he was actually trying to be friends with me, and I couldn't talk to him because he was such an idol to me. And so Lance was kind of like, he was leaning like this, and he touched Lou Reed's boot. And that's all we did. We didn't have any conversation with them. But we saw Alice Cooper there, and they invited us back to their hotel room at the Tropicana, and just ridiculous things. We go see everybody. Saw Nico there when she got the review for being a beached whale. Saw Iggy there. Yeah, and so it seemed unattainable to ever play there, and then suddenly we were playing there with Van Halen and Cheap Trick, and it really was only a couple years later. So.
Yeah, you were known as one of the few CBGB's bands that came out to LA and was playing That was an amazing time. We were the first New York band to come there, and so they treated us like we were heroes, and we were taken to Tomato de Plenty's house. It was called the Wilton Hilton, and they would have everybody who came through town, they'd offer them to stay at their house. And so I stayed there for a while, and all that stuff, and everyone, like the nascent bands, like all the members of the Go-Go's were at our shows and all that stuff. And so then we went back, and in between the time we came back for the second time, which was when we opened for Van Halen the first time and Cheap Trick the second time, I guess. But LA had made itself into a thing, and they were kind of looking askance at us then. They were kind of like, well, we have our own scene now. And all of the bands were really friendly to us still, but the fans are kind of like, well, we have X now and stuff like that. And so it was a very weird experience to be so beloved for like the first 8 months, and then the next time we were kind of second tier.
I have to ask you about one thing that I did read, and turns into a mutual friend of ours. But whenever you were following the Dolls in New York, you met Paul Zone of the Fast, and I helped co-produce the best of the Fast. So I've known Paul for a while, and that whole scene right there with those bands and Blondie and the Fast must have been an amazing time.
Oh, it was. He was really the host with the most. We'd kind of discovered the New York Dolls on our own, but he came up to us at one concert. It might have been the Dolls playing at the Diplomat, I think, one of the times when they weren't at Mercer Arts. And he came up to us, and in retrospect, I think he recognized us from American Family. So, because I don't know why he picked us out of the crowd and just talked to us, but he was so friendly and wonderful. And we became really, really close. And he did all sorts of wonderful things. He introduced us to all sorts of different people. I think he knew they were the house band at Max's, so he got us in with Peter Crowley, or the other guy who owned it before Peter Crowley, who was running it. And he even made them, when they did that one menu where they had the drinks all being named bands' names, they had a Mumps cocktail on that, but it was kind of like a pink lady or something. But Paul would actually take everyone to his house where his mother would cook us dinner. It was in Bensonhurst, I think. I don't know Brooklyn that well. I lived in Park Slope for a while, but we would all go there and we'd meet him. They'd cook us all dinner. We'd stay there forever. They were the greatest people, and the band was wonderful. We worked through the whole change between Mandy becoming the keyboard player and Paul becoming the lead singer. We were all encouraging Paul because he was the cute one. Yeah. And in retrospect, I think like, oh my God, how did Mandy feel about that? But I think he was okay, and Mickey was just great. And Paul had a car. So he would pick up me and Lydia and Bradley in New York, wherever we were, and he'd drive us all to Coney Island. And we would go to Coney Island all the time. And Lydia, when we were on the with the Cyclone, which is like a really rickety old wooden
Right.
roller coaster. We'd be on that. We'd get to the end of it, and Lydia would just lift up her dress, and we wouldn't have to get off, and we would just go around again and again and again. And Paul was the host for all of those things, and he also, he took care of me a lot in LA when I've been through tribulations with my various boyfriends. He had me add some keyboards to a record he was making with Debbie Harry, just all wonderful, wonderful. And he's still in touch with me.
Yeah.
My last birthday, he gave me my Farrah Fawcett doll.
Oh, you have it with you? Okay.
I have Jane Mansfield here, but I can get Farrah Fawcett. She's in the other room.
This is awesome. I love it. I love that Jane Mansfield. What do you say? It was a thermos?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
They
awesome.
said I need to borrow it.
Oh, this is great.
This
Kristian
was
Hoffman. Oh, there it is.
during COVID, just last July 10th, and he actually came over, and we had like 3 people here, and he just said he wanted to stop by, and he gave me my Farrah Fawcett doll.
Oh, that's awesome.
Cool. That is so cool. Yeah,
Kristian, tell us about Hilly Crystal. What are you?
Well, I'll tell you,
connections with him?
I am not a good resource for that. We were a house band at CBGB's, like many were. We played there all the time. We could always get in free. All the drinks were free. It led me down the path towards later in life, some sort of alcoholic misbehavior. Yeah, I'm one of those people who's in recovery. You've heard about it before. But so he was a big guy, kind of with a beard. He stood up, he obviously wasn't a punk, and it was, country blues, bluegrass, and whatever. So we thought like that was the original thing that it was, and it must have been failing, because the way I got introduced to CBGB's was because of Richard Hell. Okay. Richard Hell was working with me at Cinemabilia, and he knew that we were trying to have a band, and me and Rob, who were working with him. And he said, I think I finally found a place where we can all play. And he took us to CBGB, and there were 4 people in the entire bar. And we were thinking like there's 2 of them were passed out, and the other ones were just like leaning on the bar like this. And Richard Hell said, look, there's a stage. We can just get this place. And then apparently he somehow sweet-talked Hilly into letting television play there as sort of an experiment. And I don't think we played with television the first time they played there, but I think it was very close to that. Maybe the 3rd or 4th time we ever played there was opening for television, and it was very early in their career. We played with them maybe 20 times, but wow. As soon as it got to be that it was known, everyone had a band. All our friends were trying to be musicians, and we knew Debbie from the Stilettos, and when they used to play in that little club over near Bleecker Street. I can't remember what it's called. It's just off of Bleecker Street. And
not the Bottom Line. You mean?
No, a little. It looks like a bookstore, and it had a glass storefront, and you would go into it. It was off Bleecker Street, and I just always remember Elda singing, "I left my Wednesday panties in Passaic." That's in New Jersey. That was my favorite song by them. But yeah, so we knew them, and we knew Chris was in the band, and he still had his big shag and everything, and then they all became reformed by the time they were at CBGB's for a while. Right. But it really became a great home. And then Max's very soon after that started welcoming all the bands. So they were in unison most of the time. But it wasn't difficult to get a gig. I don't know if that's just because we were so early. Mm-hmm. We were playing around in weird places. We kept losing our drummers because first Patti Smith took Jay. And that was exciting. Mm-hmm. I actually took J.D. Doherty because I could get into Max's all the time. I took him and I said, you're just going to love this girl, Patti Smith. And she was playing with Tom Verlaine, who I already knew. And so he was playing his guitar with a knife, and she was just reading poetry. And Jay just did love Patti Smith. And she said, you're the Mumps drummer, aren't you? Won't you be in my band? That set us back for about 2 years.
Oh, my God.
We went through a series of weird drummers, and it was really hard until we finally found Paul Rutner, who was given to us by Ian North of Milk and Cookies. Mm-hmm. So that was just fantastic. He just called us up and said, well, I have a drummer for you if I don't keep him myself, because we were really good friends with Milk and Cookies, and that was Paul Rutner. And then the guy, Ricky Kinster from Orchestra Luna said, I have a bass player for you if I don't keep him myself, and it was Kevin Kiley. And so we got our by the charity of other crazy musicians, the Mumps came into our final best lineup.
So there was some reciprocity, some karma going on at least.
Oh, it was great. And we would go to, when we went to Boston, the Ricky Kinship and Orchestra Luna would just let us stay at their house or put us up in various places. And there were friends of us in Washington, D.C. You'd stay over the club. Now I don't remember the name of the Washington club, but everybody played there. It was like the Washington CBGBs. And the first time you go there, they just put you up over the club. And it was like the most cliche B movie about being bohemian. There was one mattress with no bed clothing on it on this floor that was dirty. And that was kind of like the trial by fire when you went to Washington. But after that, everybody put you up. It's one thing they don't talk much about in punk rock. Like whenever you went to a town, people were reading the back of Rock Scene and they became pen pals or whatever they would do in that era. Right. And they would just, the minute you got to sound check, they'd say, my mom says you can come over for dinner. And then the second time you'd be in a town like Philadelphia or somewhere, they said, yeah, you can all stay at my house. It was kind of like a hippie thing in punk rock clothing. Everyone was really celebratory and finding this underground way together. And so,
did you guys play a lot of the gay clubs? Did you think of yourselves as a gay band, or did you market yourself?
No, I mean, we didn't think of ourselves as not a gay band. Lance and I were never in the closet or anything. And then we got Kevin; he was gay too. No, but we just played all of the punk rock clubs, and and there was one thing that I used to, when I briefly had a car in New York, and when you have a car in New York City, everyone totally falls in love with you. And the one thing that you would do is, and it was a Chevy Vega, and Jim Sclavunos could fit under the hatchback in the Chevy Vega, and he was about 6'4", and but we would just all pile in the car and just say, let's go make fun of the people in front of Studio 54. So we would get in the car, and we just yell insults at them or something like that. So Lance got me into Studio 54 through his connections with Interview Magazine and all of that crazy stuff. But
did you like any disco music at that time, or did you just?
I liked some, there were some of them, but like in the formative years when we were in New York and not being able to hold a band together for a very long time, and we kept moving because we didn't pay our rent, and the cliche thing you do when you're 18 or something. The radio was very lonely, and we didn't have a record player until we bought one at the thrift store. But the two things we listened to were the Raspberries and ABBA. Those are the two resources that we found that we actually thought were writing beautiful, exciting songs. Yeah. And during disco, it was kind of like that too. There were like 3 or 4 things we liked, and we liked like quasi disco, like Grace Jones and stuff like that. And what we really liked was a song with a hook and a melody.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because you talk about the punk clubs and the punk scene and whatnot. You were the Mumps were lighter as far as musically was concerned, but like the band like the Dead Boys or something. Were you into some of the harder punk at the time?
Well, of course, I thought that Johnny Blitz or whatever his name was, the drummer, was super cute, so I followed him around. He would never have sex with me, but we were through Lydia partly. I met Lydia at a Dead Boys concert at CBGB's.
Okay.
And then we were all friends with them, and they came to 240 Grand too. And then I didn't think of them. They wrote hooky songs.
Well, they did, yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't think of them as, and we were huge Raw Power fans, and we're huge Velvet Underground fans. So we like a fuzz guitar. And I just like to write things with melody and choruses and stuff like that. So I didn't really think
what's on record doesn't always transfer to what's live too.
Yeah.
Yeah, based on production. Yeah. No.
And also, I was a huge Sex Pistols fan until Johnny Rotten became a huge asshole. But I loved all those new wave punk rock. I loved the new wave. I liked it all.
Yeah, nice.
I'm a consumer.
Did your path ever cross with the art scene, Keith Haring and Andy Warhol in New York?
Andy Warhol was more of kind of a mystery. When I moved to New York for a while, I lived with Christopher Makos. He's a photographer. He's a pretty notorious photographer who became one of Andy Warhol's best friends towards the end, and actually was kind of his babysitter. But he for Lance, when once he went back to Santa Barbara, he just left me there. And he said, well, Christopher will let you live with him. And I thought, like, you're really going to let me live with you? And he was so nice. And he let me live with him there. And that was during the time when I was a huge New York Dolls thing. And he encouraged me. I used to do these little doodles. And he said, you should give that drawing to David Johansen. And it was the Bend Over Girl that ended up on the record. So he really helped me in that era. But I didn't know. And so Christopher's other boyfriend that came a little bit after that used to be the secretary at the door of the factory. So there were lots of Andy Warhol things, and Andy Warhol and Lance met because Andy Warhol and Lance was somehow with Interview Magazine. And then also he kind of knew Lance from before when he made the phone calls. And then there was the pop thing of American Family. And that was kind of like a real live soap opera. But they weren't really close friends. And there's one picture of me with Lance and Andy. We're having lunch, and I'm kind of like, am I allowed to speak? You know?
Yeah.
But what was that though? That
Keith Haring, I was talking about.
Keith Haring was much more on the East Village scene, and I knew him fairly well. And he was that was around the Club 57 at transitioning into the Mud Club scene. And he was around all of that. And at the same time as Patty Astor had the Fun Gallery. And I think she might have given Keith Haring one of his first shows. I'm not quite sure, but there was I stayed with Patty Astor a lot of the time. And she lived right up the street from us. And so we loved the Fun Gallery. And Patty Astor's ex-husband, Stephen Kramer, who's now no longer with us, had his huge shows there they were basically based on robot mice. Mm-hmm. And he had one called An Apartment Destroying Mouse that was all made out of metal. And it would just run around and break things. So you couldn't actually go into the gallery when it was turned on. And another one where it was a box that you looked into, like a peep box. Yeah. And it was a lady's legs that were going up and down as a mouse chased her in the box. He was an incredible artist. And then Susan Hannaford and Tom Scully, who were our neighbors, started a club that you can't call it what it was called then. It was called Beulah Land, which was right next to the Fun Gallery.
I know that place.
Yeah. And so we were involved with all those people. That was our family. So I didn't, and Klaus was very deeply involved with Keith Haring in that whole scene, and so was Joey. And Kenny Sharp was a good friend of ours from Club 57. I used to DJ at Club 57. And, of course, and I DJ'd at when it became the big Club 57 at the theater later, when it wasn't just a little thing on St. Mark's Place. And I would play the Carpenters, and then people in leather jackets would threaten to kill me. And then they'd hire a bodyguard for me. So that was really exciting. Like all these people we knew they were from New Jersey, and like that was the worst insult you could say about anybody. And they'd come up when I play the Carpenters. They'd go like, "Fuck this! Turn this off!" And then I'd have a bodyguard like that.
I was from Rockland County. What did you guys think of Rockland County people? Nothing at all, probably.
Yeah, very little. The one thing is that David McDermott, who I lived with for a while, his grandmother was in New Jersey, and it was the first time I'd ever driven by. When you go out of Manhattan into New Jersey, all you see is horrible factory lands and this kind of like industrial wasteland. Yeah. And then as you get a little bit into New Jersey, she lived in a beautiful cottage and a lovely street. She collected Fiesta wear because she was an elder, and of course I was already into thrift stores. So I thought, oh my God, it's Fiesta wear, girlfriend. And so, but she really introduced us into the world of New Jersey as a beautiful, livable state. And we walk around her neighborhood, and it was an older section. I guess her house was built in like 1923. And since I was living with the guy, David McDermott, who was trying to live in 1890, so he had taken all the electricity out of his apartment, and we lived by candlelight. I appreciated old things.
It's awesome. Yeah, I grew up. I'm from Keith's hometown of Kutztown. I grew up with Keith's younger sister. I graduated with her, so I'm a very big Keith Haring fan, which was of that time period. What I'd like to ask you with a lot of your music, as I said, beautiful melodies, and you were interviewed, and you said you were an observational songwriter. Mm-hmm. And postulatory songwriter, which means you can basically put yourself in a situation that you've never been in before and be able to feel it and write about it and emote about it, which is absolutely spot on with a lot of your music. I mean, not knowing that you were never in some of those situations, but just just really well done. And I love that phrase, a postulatory songwriter and observational songwriter. It's great.
Well, emoting is a fancy word for dumping.
Yeah.
Now, how did you get connected with Greg Dwinell? Now we're getting to your solo career.
Greg Dwinell, it's weird that I'm not really clear about the specificity of me meeting him. I think I was introduced to him by it's because all of this stuff was very close at one time. I was kind of like at this place where I didn't know what I was doing. And Joseph Fleury, who was the manager of Sparks, who ultimately ended up managing Mumps and the Swinging Madisons and helped me through all of those transitions. He came to my house once and he said, and I said, I don't know what I'm doing now. I'm writing all these folk songs and I don't even like folk anymore. And they're the saddest songs I've ever written. Why am I doing this? And he said, oh, it's just your time of life. Everybody goes through that. And these songs are great. You should just do a folk album. And around that time, I don't know, it might've been through John Easdale or somebody I knew introduced me to him. And he was really, really nice. And, so he was helping me with that I Don't Love My Guru album, and he finally said he was going to put out the CD of that, and that was kind of like, oh my God. And then Earl Mankey said he would produce it, and I still have them at Earl Mankey when he still lived in Los Angeles. I think he lived somewhere out near Santa Monica. He let me come to his house, and because Joseph Lurie knew him, and I recorded 3 songs on the piano in his house singing live. They're really scary. So those are my blackmail tapes that will be released at some point. But so Earl Mankey was the greatest producer everywhere. He was just a total enthusiast, and he would just encourage me in everything. And then when I didn't know what to do, he said, well, I'll make up a part now. And he would just go in the room and play guitar, or if the bass player didn't show up, he played the bass. And all he just said was, and then he'd sing backing vocals. He would just do everything. And so
great producer and a really good guy also.
But I do remember one of the things that happened with Greg Dwinell that I really liked that started this down a whole other line was that I heard that these people were trying to put together a Bee Gees tribute album. And I said, I want to be on that, but I don't think they like me. Will you buy it from them? And so it turned out that they didn't actually have anybody to put it out. And so he told them, it was the Jigsaw Scene, and he said, I will put it out, but you have to put Kristian on the record. So he kind of blackmailed them into the Jigsaw Scene into allowing me to be on the Bee Gees tribute record. Good. And then we did the Hollies one afterwards. But that introduced me to all the people that were on that tribute album, because they knew a lot of really fun bands. And it was another one of those things where you you just wander through life and there's a whole other community that you're lucky enough to be introduced to or doing crazy stuff. And then
you're living in California again at this point, right?
Yeah, well, for 40 years. I
wasn't sure when you got back, but okay.
I moved here in 1985. Okay. So it's quite some time.
Well, when does the off-Broadway show come out from the album that has all the guest artists on it? Because number one, lyrically fantastic. It's just so wonderful to listen to. But Sex in Heaven with Ann Magnuson.
It's called And. Because it was supposed to be Kristian and then the designer, who is Randy Draper, is a good friend of mine from the neighborhood, and his boyfriend is an artist, and he said, well, let's just make it an ampersand instead of saying and. Okay. And then once you call it, then people don't know if it's called ampersand or what it's called, but it's called And. So it's Kristian Hoffman and so those are all, and I just kept, I ran into Stu from the Negro Problem at Spaceland, and he had once said that he liked the Mumps song Anyone But You, and I said, well, why don't you just sing that with me? And he said, okay. And that's what happened with everybody on that record. I'd worked with Rufus for a while. I think I'd already been fired from his band by that time, though. But I said, would you sing the song with me? And it's kind of like Matthew Shepard, it's kind of a bummer. And he said, yes, I'll do it. And I remember he had rented an apartment near Tower Records over on Sunset Boulevard. And I went over there to play it for him. And Kate was in the room. So it was really embarrassing. And she just said, Rufus, you've got to do that song. And so she really helped that happen. I mean, who, in what world do Lance and I get a Kate and Anna McGarrigle record because he's a reviewer for Rock Scene in the mail? We listen to it and we think, well, I don't know, this is pretty folksy, but I think this might be the greatest record ever made. And then the reason we went to see Rufus when we was playing at, it was on Fairfax. What was that club called then? It wasn't the Lhasa Club. Largo. He was playing at Largo, Rufus, and we went there only because we thought Kate might be there. And of course she wasn't there, but Rufus fell in love with Lance. And so Lance said, well, I'm not going to be your friend unless you put Kristian in your band. And so he sort of reluctantly did that. And then we went all over the place and got to meet Kate and Anna McGarrigle and do all this crazy stuff. So all of this stuff happened just by chance or because we were fans, basically, because we followed everyone around.
You put yourself in the places at the time it happened. It just organically went where it goes, and we find that a lot. It's what makes these stories so fascinating. Is you just don't know it's going to happen. Nothing's planned. It just happens. And you were of a time that there was just so much going on, and so many places, and so many artists and things. It's absolutely fascinating to hear these stories.
I wanted to play a song, one of my favorite songs of yours. It's from Fa, called Out of the Habit, because I think this really does encapsulate who you are, and I want people to hear it. So here we go.
Eek.
Oh.
When the Spielberg crowd fell the stars of evening day, generate the best melting tears of regret. But the star tracks on to the end of the dawn. Why is it that I don't feel anything yet? Oh, sad can kill me in vain. But I guess I'm never
It's a leaper.
again. But that doesn't mean that I'll ever love you. Just out of the habit when the favorite boy fell behind the cabin door, still I felt the trace memory of its touch with a heart so cold. Is it possible that I could forget how I miss you so much? Oh, sad can kill me in the end. But I guess I'm out of the habit again. But that doesn't mean that I'll ever love you. Just out of the habit again. There's a little boy by the side who cries, please don't leave me behind. Once I would have wept at the shame, but now I can't even remember his name.
Beautiful.
Big drums.
Yeah.
In the red Bangkok with the band of alcohol, I muster up some remorse for you still, but But the wind turns cold and it comes up and over. Now I take myself to feel one little chill of the sunset can kill me in the end. But I guess another habit again. But that doesn't mean
Gorgeous. Gorgeous.
Yeah. Can I say that's one of the most beautiful songs ever written? I guess I just did.
Sure.
Very Baroque pop in a lot of things that you do, Kristian. Where did the love of that sound come from? What influenced you to kind of go in that road with?
Well, of course, I'm of a certain era, so when I heard Yesterday, it sounded radical at the time, and then the Left Bank came out, and I became an ardent supporter of other Sgt. Peppers wherever I would hear them, and other people who played around with orchestral tropes, and I always loved Baroque rock or Baroque or whatever you want to call it, and I aspired towards that, as I did aspire towards like this grinding of the Velvet Underground or something. I loved all those things, and I didn't see really any problem between those things cohabitating the same musical universe. Yeah. But also, we were raised in the hippies made you kind of hopeful, and then of course Reagan destroyed the public educational system, so everybody got stupider and stupider and stupider. But it's over the course of our lives, it became habitual to be in despair, and either you're in denial about it or you're advocating some sort of solution. And, at this point, it's hard to believe any solution will work. And that's kind of the curve of our lives, is being cognizant that we are in that special moment that it's, I already wrote the song, it's the end of the world and everyone's going to be invited. When the kids lay down on the job, all the kids going to be united, because we're the only ones that are going to get to see it, unless we actually manage to make it not happen. Right. So that I love a sad song, and I loved the sad songs when I were young, and when we were young, and I loved all of those Baroque pop memes, but also it's different to write a weeper now. It's easy. It's not easy to write something that's beautiful or moving. And I do like wordplay, but I wish that I would write more cheery songs. I can write upbeat, sarcastic songs.
Yes.
but even a great like jangly pop song, I Can't Go There with You. Still has that, the downer side of it, but man, it's such a jangly, happy kind of song.
Yeah, I can sound upbeat and
but lyrically it goes the other way. But I also got to tell you too, your voice is I think is underrated as well. You've got a great voice. I mean, you really when you climb the register, and it's just really well done. And cheers for that.
Well, I blush, but I'm too old. The blood won't go up that high anymore.
That's okay. We can.
We all have that problem now, Chris.
Yeah.
We can change the RGB on the screen here, make it look like you're blushing. But no,
I can't go there with you. I'll just say that's a little song about land. So it is a sad song, because it's like he just put his life in danger in so many ways. And it's what made him my guide through life, is what he said, let's go in, let's plunge, let's be on an adventure. And with him, I went all sorts of, like Altamont. And the weird thing about it is, like, we left our Santa Barbara for 3 days. Our parents didn't even notice we were gone. Wow. So we were lucky that way. Wow. But, moving to New York was easy when you're with a cohort who's just so crazy and says it's all going to be fine, and if it isn't, we're going to have the greatest time on the way to the apocalypse. It's just going to be great.
How difficult has it been without him?
What?
How difficult has it been without him?
The one thing that I'm very blessed about is that I have managed to be part of many creative, supportive communities. So it was, he was my best friend. At the end, we were somewhat estranged, partially because before he got sick, he was heavily into drug use. And I may have gotten into the alcoholic thing, but I didn't ever take drugs. I was boring that way. So it was one of those. I remember when I used to drive him around sometimes at like 3 a.m. and I thought, like, this is fun. We're going to go up to Mulholland Drive. And then he would inexplicably start weeping then. And then I finally realized it was meth or speed or something. And it took me a long time because I didn't take drugs. I didn't have any experience with them. But so he went down some roads that were, that I still loved him, but we were alienated from each other somehow. But when he died, it was like, it's like if your house burns down, it's like you can't go back there ever again. And then his funeral was, and Rufus came and sang at his funeral, and it was at the Chateau Marmont, and Kate McGarrigle was there, and all of our various friends were there. It was one of the hardest and yet one of the most beautiful events in my life. But I'm lucky that I have been just surrounded with, there always has been an Ann Magnuson there who said, hey, why don't you produce my record? Or else then my husband for a long years, he said, I want to make the band with your songs that sounds like the Boswell Sisters, only we're going to do your songs. And it's 3 of the greatest vocalists in LA. I'm working with them right now. Or, Prince Poppycock came walking down the street one day. He got in touch with me, I think through Facebook, and said, can I come visit you? And I didn't have any idea what it was, but I thought it might be fun. And he just wanted me to write songs for him. And, we got on America's Got Talent. Ridiculous stuff like that. We didn't get the $1 million, but he was the second runner up, and we went to Europe and all that crazy. So, and Joey Arias took me to Europe. So there's always been, I've been very blessed touring for almost 5 years with Dave Davies. Who'd have thunk? I've been very, very lucky to be with people who connect me with other people. And I hope I've done that to other people as well, that I've said, you ought to meet this person or do that.
I've seen you do it, so I can attest to the fact that you have. Will there ever be another Kristian Hoffman a solo record? Because I would love one.
Well, I will tell you, this is my confession. I'm a deadline baby. The way that FOP came about was like, I actually was in kind of a depression at that point because I just didn't know what I was doing. It wasn't that I had lost all faith in art or had stopped listening to music, but I just thought, like, I have a default why bother affect that I go to. So Gary Stewart just called me up out of the blue, and he said, why the fuck aren't you writing songs? And I said, I don't really know. And he said, well, I want you to make a new album, and I'll executive produce it. And so that's how that happened. I shouldn't need that to happen. I know other people have a discipline, go and, they don't do it 20 minutes every day or like a regular exercise, but they actually go and make an effort. Right. But I've written most of my songs. Like when I did the Ann Magnuson album, she had some poetry that wasn't finished. And so I finished all that song and was in a flurry of excitement. We did that in about, 6 months. We threw that all together. And so one thing that Justin is trying to do is he's trying to make a musical out of my songs. And then and he actually already got me to write a whole bunch of songs for this girl named Mary Shear, and she's a wonderful actress. And we put it together and we had a reading and it just didn't get picked up. But this friend of mine, Timur Bosanoff, who's an opera singer, is maybe going to sing one of those songs when he goes and plays at Rotterdam. So there's still crazy stuff happening, but I need to be pushed. And, now that I'm at this ripe old age, people don't want to push me as often. You're like, icky, I'll get the cooties.
I may try to do that. Okay. Because I would love to see it, and I know other people would as well.
And also, I'd love to work with all the wonderful people I still know. And there's people like, because of COVID, that's another thing that sort of drew everything to a halt. Like, I'd love to just call up Andrew and say, what the fuck are you doing? But for almost 3 years, I didn't call anybody. I thought, like, and so I'm out of touch with people. One thing that I've been very blessed is that the people at that, do you know about Brookledge? It's run by the people who run the Magic Castle, and the woman who lives in the house is Erica Larson, and then it has a theater from the 1920s, and I've been the musical director there for about 12 years.
Wow.
And they always... It's like getting another whole community together, and it's all magicians and crazy people like that. But like, like one night, Randy Newman came to one of the shows.
Oh, wow.
And so I got Erica Larson's daughter. I said, you've got to sing. You've been wrong before. I've been wrong before, because Randy Newman's going to be there. And he was very moved by it, which was just amazing. And she sang it so beautifully. But then he came over to me at the piano and said, well, you got this one chord wrong. And he showed me how to play it, but he did that. He came right up. It was Randy Newman.
Yeah.
Crazy. So that's a whole other community I've been lucky enough to have. So those people push me to produce something fairly regularly. So I'm just trying to work on that. I know I think I'm a good songwriter. I don't have any problem in the ego department. No. But the discipline department, I have a little issue with.
Well, we'll try.
We would love to see it. Yeah,
we'll try to make it happen. Listen, Kristian, thank you so much for being on with us.
Thank you. And I hear you have a pool.
Anytime you want to come over, let me know.
I'll be right over in about 20 minutes. I'll see you then.
You're just going to hear a big splash.
Yeah. Okay.
Kristian, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you tonight. Thank you so much for hanging out here on Material Issues, and we wish you the absolute best in everything you're doing. You still got going on. We ran the KristianHoffman.com along the bottom. There's information there for everybody who may be new to all of your work.
I'll get killed if I don't say this before we stop. I do have a radio show on luxuriamusic.com every single Sunday from noon till 2:00 p.m. Western time. Because otherwise, Cat will come and get me.
Well, best wishes to you. Stay happy, stay healthy, have a wonderful 2023. And again, really wonderful to have you here on Material Issues.
Thank you. And you made me happy today. So that's an accomplishment.
It's our pleasure. Believe me.
Have a great night, Kristian. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
There you have it, David. Episode number 88. Lisa checking in. Hi, Kristian. We love you. A lot of people were watching the episode. I think we didn't get a whole lot of comments because people were just actively listening.
I was thinking the same thing. They were really engrossed.
I didn't want to interrupt, and I didn't want to interrupt either. It was a wonderful conversation. Quite the career, and still going strong, which is even better.
I hope there'll be another album. I really do, because Fop was my favorite, and that's the last one he did. So
Mockingbird.
Got to be a lot of stuff left in him. So
indeed. That was absolutely wonderful. Really a great interview. Just enjoyed the heck out of that one, David. Good get. Speaking of good gets, we got a lot of things coming up here, huh?
You've got one that will be, this is revelatory, but
we haven't
next week this one. Next week we have scheduled, and I say that tentatively because she's a very busy lady, but I'm hoping this holds. Complete 180 from the world of Kristian Hoffman and music, but this woman is one of the preeminent sports writers, a baseball writer for the San Francisco Chronicle, covered the A's and the Giants. She's a member of the Baseball Writers Association. She gets to vote on the Baseball Hall of Fame, which actually just did their announcement of who they elected this year. And I also, of course, being a female sports writer, she's gone through what women always go through when they enter a male domain, and which is all very unfortunate. But I'm sure she has stuff to relate about that. But she's a great lady, and we certainly hope she ends up being able to do this. Susan Slusser will be our guest on February 1st. Next Wednesday, as well, or at least here's hoping.
Yeah.
But we definitely have the next two guests are, as far as we know, 1,000,000% in. On Wednesday, February 8th, we have a woman who was a member of the Fort Worth garage scene, Fort Worth, Texas, garage scene in the mid 60s. The garage music scene was actually, it was quite fruitful in that particular. I mean, it wasn't all the same in every city. I have every possible garage compilation, a geographical compilation. And there were some cities that just had more than others. And Fort Worth, Dallas area had a lot. What, of course, they didn't have a lot of was female garage bands. And but this woman happened to be a member of one of them called Candy and the Canes. She was Candy, still is. Candy Chase will be on Material Issues on February 8th, and I'm sure there's another woman who made her mark in a male-dominated situation, and of course they had to go through some stuff as well with men who weren't all that happy about women infiltrating their domain. But
that'll be an interesting story.
She also has a lot of great stories about being in a band and playing rock and roll. And this will be a fun guest for sure. But on the 15th, Mark has secured somebody who is an icon to a lot of us. So tell us about it.
Yeah, how could you even lead up to this? I'm just going to say on the 15th, we've got Dave Gregory of XTC.
Incredible.
That's Dave. Dave. He was there for it all with XTC. So, what do you got? XTC is one of my favorites. One of favorites, probably so many people. And where do you begin with that entire canon? But yeah,
I guess we'll find out where we begin. When
took a little while to secure him, but he's still busy playing with a lot of people and doing a lot of guitar work, and the guy was there for it all. So Dave Gregory of XTC on February 15th.
An awesome coup, Mark. Yeah. Thank you so much. I can't wait to have him on.
Can't wait. It's going to be great. And after that,
irons in the fire.
A lot of irons in the fire, because you never know. You never know when someone might.
We never know either. I mean, sometimes I don't know how it happens with you, Mark, but sometimes I'll be reading Facebook, and somebody will post, and someone will post something, and I'll get inspired to contact them maybe, and sometimes people. I remember the first guy who told me this credo was Mike from the Raz Band, who when he was a teenager, he used to get to play with all kinds of amazing musicians, ones that you would be in awe of, you wouldn't even talk to. And I asked him, how were you able to do that? He said, I just asked him.
Yeah,
that's what you have to do.
It really is.
You have to be able to be rejected, which is a lot easier to do online than right in your face. Right. So anytime you want to, if you want to work with somebody, or you want someone to speak at your event, or you just have to ask them. And if you can get directly to them, especially rather than have to go through their people, they're soulless booking people and managers. Blech.
Yeah.
I mean, there are, of course, some very nice booking people and managers, so I don't want to disparage them all, but sometimes that's difficult. But if you can get directly to the people, you never know who's just going to say, sure. Maybe they'll like the idea of what you're doing. Maybe they think you're a good person. They want to help you out. Maybe the timing is good. Maybe they have something to promote. So here's another avenue.
A lot of it is if the timing is good, because many people are busy with a lot of things, and to project ahead 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, and say a Wednesday at whatever, sometimes it's tough to do. But sometimes it turns around and you get them at the right time, and they're like, "Yeah, I can do it."
Timing is everything, but also, as Branch Rickey said, luck is a residue of design, which means, of course, that you make your luck.
Sure, you do.
You don't just sit there and wait for it to come to you. You work and make opportunities happen. Yeah. And one way to do that, of course, is to ask people. Don't say to yourself, "Oh, well, they're going to say no. Screw it. Why? You know, I don't want to bother them. You know, sometimes it's no bother. Sometimes they're actually happy to hear from people like you.
And I'll tell you what,
like
the cool thing about what we do here and how much fun we have, you and I, with all these guests and material issues is, you know, we get guests that, you know, so many of them, they're really big time, but some might not be in the zeitgeist of everybody's forefront.
Right.
We've looked at one of my favorite interviews we did was Bergen White, the great guest that you got.
Oh, he was funny.
He's legendary. But when you say, well, we had Bergen White on, a lot of people would be like, who? Then you go, da, 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 da,
yeah,
in
certain circles, he's very legendary. You find out like who, you know, that he worked with Elvis, for God's sake.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Just amazing. So
there you go. Well, Andy, I'm hardly anybody that anyone should be hesitant to reach out to. Number one, I'm not anywhere near the pantheon that these people are. The other thing is, I am the most. I like to think of myself as the most approachable person out there. Because when I was a kid, I hated people who put up fronts, who had mystiques. You know, I'm an open book, and anyone who wants to talk to me, for God's sakes, if you're out there and you're hesitant to talk to me because you think I'm not going to want to talk, God, no. I don't care who it is. I'm happy to talk to anyone. And
I just got a message.
If you're a band who has music that's IPO, that's IPO friendly, don't think, oh, he's going to reject me. I mean, even if I do, I'm going to do it in a nice way. I promise you that. I'm not going to be a dick to anybody. So
I just got a message from Kristian Hoffman, David. He's in your pool right now. If you could bring some refreshments out, is what he said.
Oh, wow. Clive, can you bring the hors d'oeuvres out to Kristen, please?
Didn't you hear the splash?
Yeah.
Well, that was a wonderful show tonight. Again, great guest. I absolutely enjoyed that, my friend. That was it was so I hope everybody enjoyed it. I hope anybody who's watching that hasn't become a member of our Facebook page or on YouTube, materialissues.com, please subscribe, please join, please tell your friends about it, because we have a great time here on Material Issues with a lot of really great guests and really, really wonderful, you know.
That's very kind.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're nice people. We don't want to, we're not going to go in we're not going to be like Jim Gray and ask Pete Rose about being kicked out of baseball during the 50th anniversary of forgot what it was. Oh, the 50 greatest players of all time game or whatever. And it was the first time Rose was back in among his peers and in a stadium, and he has to go there. We're not going to be dicks like that. We're not going to try and probe people in areas that they don't want to talk. We're just going to ask them positive things about themselves. So thank you for saying that, Tim. I'm glad that's come across.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we have a lot of fun with it. And David and I are pretty easygoing, and we always tell the guests, trust me, this hour will fly by. And it always does.
Yeah, I learned that when I started teaching psychology. It was 3-hour classes. We'd have a break in the middle, but I'd be up there talking, and suddenly an hour and a half go by, and I didn't even know where it went. I can't vouch for my students. Well, they didn't know where it went either, because they fell asleep, and then they woke up. Man, the time went fast. But yeah, when you're engrossed in anything, and I know musicians who I've spoken with who played, let's say, IPO, especially when we had 20-minute sets, they'd say that 20 minutes just flew by. We were on stage and then we're off. And even 30-minute sets are quick. When you're engrossed in anything, it goes fast. When you're bored or you're waiting for the doctor to come and see you, you're just tapping on a table. Like, come on, clock. So yeah, it's all a matter of perspective. But yeah, these hours do fly by.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Well, and down the road we'll have more Stump the Bash and some things to play. So we've got a lot of things going on here in 2023, and I hope everybody keeps joining us. We really appreciate all the good words and everybody that sticks around. It's fantastic. It's a lot of fun.
It really has been. I'm so glad that you thought of doing this. You know, it was Mark's idea, and I'm really glad that I've been able to be a part of this with you. So,
Well, that was episode 88. We are quickly approaching 100 episodes here. We've got
a
12 more
century
to go.
mark. Yeah.
And that's something. Phew.
Oh yeah.
That boggles my mind just right there.
Definitely.
88 episodes, but great. We'll see everybody next week. Watch for the emails. We'll let you know exactly what's going on, and have a great night.
Yeah, everybody. Thank you. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week, we hope.